We are recording. Okay, so now we can do it. Welcome everybody. This is August 14 of 2019. This is our SIG API Machinery bi-weekly meeting. Thank you for joining. We have some items on the agenda, so we are going to go through it. And here we are. So let's begin.
Yeah, so I think David isn't here, so I don't know if we can discuss the storage version super in depth. I think David was mostly in agreement, and the sticking point is like, should API servers actually coordinate over the storage version? Is that necessary? I think it's not essential for the proposal. No. I think so eventually, I think API servers do need to coordinate over some things. Like there's some facts, there's some configuration details that are facts that should be facts about the cluster and not facts about API server. And I think all API servers should like coordinate over those values. In particular, like feature gates are an example that Chow brought up. Like it would be great if all API servers had the same idea of what features were on, which means that taking that from flags is maybe not the best idea. Like I don't have a idea of where it should come from. Just I would like some model where we can coordinate over things. I think the like this, I'd like this to like demonstrate or try out something in that direction. It seems like, to me, it seems like logically the storage version is a fact about the cluster, not a fact about API server, but it's not critical. And like of all the things that we run in the partially upgraded split API server version model, like that doesn't seem like the most important one, the most significant one. So I'm fine if we like first start publishing each API server's idea of like what is possible and what it prefers, and like we can add the coordination step later. And when we do that, we should coordinate over probably the most important things at first, and storage version is probably not the most important thing to do first. So that's my thought. I don't know, Chow, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I agree with what you said. We can scope the cap a little smaller now. We're not going to do the actual coordination. We just publish the information.
Yeah, I think it would be good to like publish it in a way that it could be coordinated in a future step. Like just to gain experience with the whole idea of like API servers have different opinions, but the cluster as a whole should have certain.
I think the API servers do not need to actually coordinate what storage version to use, but they still need to coordinate what discovery document to show. Yeah. Right. So, for example, if different API servers are using different storage version right now, in the discovery document, they should just say currently the storage version is unknown, or something like that.
Yeah.
We still need a coordinated view of the discovery document.
Yeah, we still have to say something in the discovery document, and it's not good to say like what the individual API server wants, because clients might be coming through a load balancer or something and getting a random API server, and then they like they might read one discovery document and then send a request to another API server. So yeah, maybe we can figure something out. It feels really bad to put like a unknown or unstable in a discovery document or something, but maybe that's the best we can do in the short term.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, if API servers are not coordinating, then it's
okay. It's better to be truthful about the bad thing we're doing than to be
right. We're doing bad things. We're just not going to tell you, because then we would feel bad.
Yeah, I would like to tell users like a answer that is both true and good. But if I have to pick between them, I'd rather pick a true answer, I guess, yeah. Even if it's not a good answer.
I referenced what I think is a related issue about controllers flapping in a skewed cluster, which is related to an old server serving a discovery doc that is informed by new versions or new APIs available by a new server. So the thing I want to be careful about is that we That was talking about like group versions, not about storage version. So it's not exactly the same, but when we talk about altering the discovery document based on what is supported by all servers, we want to be careful not to return a discovery document that omits things that some of the servers are actually serving, or things like garbage collection and namespace cleanup will not be correct.
Yeah, so like coordinating over things has been like a long-standing issue. I'm pretty sure there's a GitHub issue somewhere where I listed out a few things that we could coordinate over. I think of the discovery doc related stuff, the storage version is maybe the least interesting thing to coordinate over. Like,
yeah.
The external versions and the fields that are visible are much more meaningful to users. And especially if like we're adding a field to a version that already existed, and the discovery both the new and the old discovery document are lying about some other API server. So we should. I
mean that's talking about the Open API doc.
Yeah. Sorry. People say, if you're just talking about which sets of versions, like our homegrown discovery, which is just about which versions are available, that one, it seems like we could coordinate over and just display the common set, the set that's common to all.
Well, that's what I was saying. If we just display the common set, we will break garbage collection and namespace cleanup. We actually need to not serve the new APIs.
Yeah, no, that's
okay. So as long as it's not just discovery, it's like
not just discovery, but also don't serve
yes.
The new versions until everybody's ready to serve them.
Then this cap is going to solve, right? You actually need to vote on. I mean,
but that's not
actually.
This isn't storage version. This is served.
Yeah,
version.
but the mechanism can be used to decide if we support a new API or not.
Yeah,
if we serve a new API or not.
So maybe you can evolve the KEP to focus more on the served versions than the storage version.
That will be another cap.
Okay. Yeah, maybe one high level bit we should decide on is like, do we want a single object which serves all of our coordination needs, or do we want a model and we like make a new resource to solve each separate coordination problem? That might be something to think about. Because you can write the KEP differently depending on which we choose. Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on this? I think we can probably stop discussing this one since David's not here.
So in concrete, we are going to continue discussion with David, but Joe already seems to have some mention ideas.
Yeah, I think you've got an idea of what edits to make, and yeah, I'm sure we'll discuss this again in the future. It's kind of a big, long-standing problem, so if it takes us a few iterations to get the design right, that's fine. It's been wrong for like 5 years. So.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the first step is for the storage version type to reduce the scope. And then for the other coordination issues, like what the group versions,
You're just saying we can solve it in a couple steps, like first just start publishing our opinions, which is enough to unblock the storage migrator, and then later add a.
Yeah, that would be a separate type.
Yeah, that's great. I'm always in favor of doing things in small pieces. The only thing I would add is like make sure that the small pieces are aiming in the right direction. It'd be a shame if we start publishing those, but it's in a format that is not easy to coordinate over. Okay, good. Add support for HTTP or SOCKS proxy to kubeconfig.
Hi, yeah. So there's this. There's been this issue open for a while, actually, end of 2017. The problem is if you use client Go, and let's say you're writing a controller that needs to talk to 2 or more cluster APIs, and those APIs are reachable only through, let's say, different proxies,
Mm-hmm.
you're in a bit of a bind because you can specify a proxy, but today you can specify exactly one proxy, and you can do that by setting an environment variable, and that applies to the entire process, right? And then that.
Can you not fix this by wrapping up the dialer? Like I thought you could construct a client with a custom dialer. You could wrap this up in. Like obviously it's not going to be super easy or simple, but it surprises me that it's not possible.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's not that it's not possible, but so for my the use case that I'm thinking of is for so there's a sub-project of the cluster lifecycle called Cluster API, and there are common controllers and that are being written, and they are going to be talking to different cluster API endpoints. And it would be great not to have to modify those controllers, with like explicit support for for proxies and different network requirements. So today those controllers just load a kubeconfig for the cluster that they need to talk to, and so it would be great to just add that add support for like an HTTP proxy, potentially a SOX proxy in the kubeconfig, and then that can be sort of transparent to the controller. It just loads the kubeconfig, and everything would then be prepared by client Go.
Can I ask some questions about like the setup here? Is it the case that like so you've got like multiple clusters and you've got a kubeconfig for each one, but like the host name or the IP address in each kubeconfig is the same or different but just not accessible, or how can you just be more concrete about what the networking model is that we're trying to solve?
Sure. So imagine that you have a cluster where these controllers run, and then the what I call workload, or with a cluster API called workload clusters. They might be running in environments, each of them in different networks that restrict, let's say, ingress from the internet. And so then you might set up something like a TCP tunnel, and then over that TCP tunnel you can reach from those controllers can reach those individual clusters. But when you're using the TCP tunnel, that will affect how you configure your certificates, etc. If you use an HTTP proxy, for example, or a SOX proxy as an alternative, you don't need to do any sort of special configuration for each of those workload clusters.
So specifically, I'm trying to figure out, like, are these clusters in networks with overlapping IP spaces, or like are they? Yeah, maybe we can start there.
I guess I'm not sure where you're going. They're different networks. They're private networks. They may or may not have overlapping IP spaces.
Okay, so we actually have a very similar problem getting traffic from the control plane into the cluster, at least in some environments. And Walter, who is on vacation at the moment, has just added a egress. This concept of an egress type to API server, and a corresponding connectivity with a K connectivity service that runs in the cluster. So it's like from API server's perspective, you configure like, okay, etcd traffic gets dropped on the network this way, like just directly dial it. Traffic that's intended to go through to things running in the cluster has to go through this proxy. So there's this like API server dials to this proxy server, And inside the cluster, there's agents that also dial into the proxy server, and it tunnels through the connection the agents make. This is replacing the old SSH tunnels that API server used to make, so it'll be great to get that code out. I'm just trying to think through like how similar your use case is to that. Sounds like it's the same basic problem, but I don't see any way that we can reuse those concepts or pieces on it.
It looks like the traffic direction is different. So for the connectivity service, the traffic is from the API server to the cluster.
Yeah.
And then for the problem, the issue is talking about, we're talking about right now, is about the controller talking to API server.
Yeah. One controller talking to the API
Is
server.
the goal to have one process that is constructing multiple clients internally from kubeconfig files, each of which could be using a different proxy?
Yes.
Yeah.
And if that process was run in an environment which itself set like proxy, HTTP proxy, HTTPS proxy, and vars, what would you expect the interaction between those to be? Like kind of the outside the process view of where traffic should be going, and then inside.
So I'm understanding this like theoretically as like a kubeconfig file should tell you how to talk to the control plane of a cluster. Some cluster control planes are behind particular firewalls, or you have to go through proxies or tunnels, or like it's not as simple as just making a network request. And further, like so it makes sense to like put that information in the kubeconfig file and not into the environment of the program that's operating on the kubeconfig file, because then you have to thread this information in two different places, and it means it's much harder to consume. You can't use a standard tool on a cluster behind this strange networking environment without doing something beyond editing your kubeconfig file. That seems like a reasonable.
So today, when you construct a client, we honor environment proxy settings.
Yeah, but you still have to, like, if you want to construct a client, you have to set up the environment and set up the kubeconfig file.
So the presumption of the proxy settings today is that the thing that has knowledge about the proxy doesn't want to change the binary. It also assumes that there's a single proxy for the process. This seems to be asking to be able to change things without changing the binary. So that goal is the same, but it's assuming multiple distinct proxies.
Yeah, you're saying like the assumption of the people writing the proxy environment is that there's a single proxy to get to the network at all. Mm-hmm. And the assumption that the scenario outlined in this issue is there's a different proxy for every destination cluster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about some of the statements in this use case description about not having to change the certificate, right? But then pointing to a totally different endpoint. That doesn't sound.
Yeah, that I don't know if I follow that either, because like the cert that you present to the proxy or whatever should not be the same as the cert that you're going to present to the API server that you're actually trying to dial.
I'm not sure how we do at sort of the HTTPS tunneling. I didn't think the Go dialer even supported that, but Mike Denise.
It must, because Walter managed to get it to work. So
okay.
But yeah, like in general, like it does seem good that you want to do some sort of authentication with the proxy, and there's no reason to suppose that the proxy is going to accept the same set of certs as the thing on the other side of the proxy that you actually want to talk to.
Yeah. So from my perspective, like the multiple distinct proxies for sub things within a single process, I can see the use case for that. I think the things we would want to be really clear about are what happens if the environment and the kubeconfig file both express opinions about proxy stuff? Like which one wins? Is it an error? Like what's the precedence? Like how does that interact?
I think in that case, I would expect us to first go through the environments proxy and then go through the kubeconfig proxy, which is probably not what what folks will want.
I would expect the opposite.
I mean, if you look at it from I'm sitting outside the process. I don't know what monkey business it's doing inside, but for it to talk to the network at all, I'm going to tell it like what proxy it needs to talk to.
So there's another model, which is why I was asking about the IP spaces. There's another model, which is the people setting up this environment are expected to like monkey with the network namespace or whatever, and actually make tunnels or NATs or whatever, so that particular IP addresses actually get routed through a proxy or manipulated in whatever manner is necessary. We debated going with that model for the egress type that I talked about a minute ago. We decided against it because it was kind of hard for, like, we felt it would be a lot easier to monitor and get it to work and like fix bugs if we had all this stuff is running as code inside a binary that we like understand, than it will be to debug as like Linux network namespaces, which is not really our area of expertise.
And it's about a controller here, which shouldn't have access to IP tables.
Yeah, no. The expectation would be that like whoever has knowledge about the network is setting up the network namespace, and the controller doesn't understand that. The controller doesn't touch IP tables or anything like that. So I don't know. I get the use case. I don't know if it.
The other question to ask is whether this is a generic use case.
Yeah.
We want to do at the config level, or we can just this is custom use case, so people can solve it. And I think like around.
Yeah, like maybe it'd be better to offer some sort of extension, like a general like. I don't know how that would look. Like the proxy interface is already kind of pretty general. Yeah,
some kind of vendor extension of the kubeconfig.
Yeah,
it's flexible.
Like we already have this extension for the authentication token or whatever. Maybe it would look something like that, but I don't really understand how that would look.
Is this thing similar to the API network proxy that is in Kubernetes 6, or it's some other project that you mentioned for egress previously?
The network proxy is the thing that got renamed to the connectivity service because we have too many things called proxies.
Okay, and it's the same project, or it's moved somewhere else, or?
It's a type under API machinery.
Okay.
This is a similar problem, but in opposite traffic direction.
Okay.
So I mean, yeah, you could like use that tool to solve this problem, where you're running a, but in the opposite direction, where you're running an agent in every cluster that you want to talk to. It dials back to a proxy server, like the server somewhere that you have access to, and like you're somehow specifying which of those things you want to go to, but I don't like, it's not clear how that would work. Like we're making a bunch of code changes in the API server to support this. I don't know that it makes sense to make those code changes in like everything that reads.
I was wondering, without being an expert, if this is something that, how hard are the network settings on the workload clusters that do not allow inbound connections? And if this is, thinking out of the box, is the connectivity problems can be solved even outside of Kubernetes with the network setup?
Yeah, maybe actually we should think about, rather than trying to solve this by fixing kubeconfig files, we should think about trying to solve this by integrating the components that we just wrote with like somehow. I don't know. I think we need to see a design that does that. I don't know. I don't know if I have great thoughts on this right now. I didn't look at this before the meeting, so this is like not pre-planned.
I mean, you can influence the way that the address is dialed, like using simple things like etc hosts. But again, it seems like a lot of work to avoid configuring the cluster's cert sans.
So the trade-off is like, we can definitely make changes to kubeconfig that add this. The trade-off is that makes every single consumer of kubeconfig, that makes their life harder, more complicated. And is the benefit from enabling this use case, does that justify the harm from like making everything complicated and going through this rollout process? And so that's the calculation that we need to decide when we vote yes or no on this. I don't know if we can make a decision on this right this instant, so I think maybe we should go on to put this into our collective consciousness to go on to the next issue. Thanks for bringing it to our attention. It's definitely an interesting question.
Yeah, thank you.
Stefan, you wanted to say something?
I just wanted to bring one thought up. Those clusters are contexts, I guess. They are not, or they have names in the kubeconfig. Yeah. I mean, you can do something in your process via another config path, via flags, whatever, where you give a number, a set of proxies, and you select the right one. So there are solutions for that, even without touching the kubeconfig. Without modifying a binary.
Wasn't one of the original complaints, though, that they didn't want to carry like custom logic in the cluster API stuff? They just wanted kind of like not to have to be like, this is a specific feature for cluster API.
Yeah, this is number one. Yeah, requires no changes to cluster API.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the thing that we'd be pushing back on, is like, does this complicating this thing, like, is that enough benefit to complicate the kubeconfig file like this?
Yeah, like a process which accepts client configs for a variety of backends which require custom proxy setup. Like, is that a common enough use case to embed this functionality in Client Go? Yeah. And how difficult would it be to shape the network, or if you did change the controller to say, in addition to giving me this kubeconfig file, like that tells me how to speak to a cluster. If you require custom network config, like a network config that says use this proxy or use these credentials, and then it sets the environment variable before it constructs. How difficult would that be? What would that look like? It would just be good to kind of have a comparison between the different approaches.
Yeah, that reminds me of something else that I wanted to mention, which is like, if you're talking some multi-tenant setup, like you should really think hard about, is it okay for both of those credentials to be loaded in memory in the same process at the same time? Like, maybe actually having like only running one process per tenant might actually be safer, because it's much harder to like have a bug that shares memory between two things.
It might not be multi-tenant, right? It might be like distinct topologies, but one
might not be. But often when people are talking about controllers that operate on multiple clusters, they are actually multi-tenant, or could be. So that might be something like are you actually gaining stuff from running the controller, like running a thread per cluster rather than a process per cluster? Okay, we're halfway through our time, and we're not halfway through our list, so we should probably continue.
Okay. Next one, I think, is Martin.
Yeah. So it's again about proxies. So a little bit of background. What we're trying to do, it's very similar to the previous historic attempt. And right now we have for every single of our clusters in front of the API servers, we have load balancers, but this is very costly attempt. So what we are currently experimenting with is to have a transparent TOS proxy, which is doing a pass-through, and it's identifying which cluster, which control plane you want to talk to, which API server you want to talk to via SNI. And this thing is working currently. However, the only problem is that right now the kubelet is not supporting the master service to be of type external name, and therefore it's not automatically injecting the correct host, the correct environment variables. We can overcome this thing by having like a mutating webhook, and that, which is mutating all the pods, but it's not a nice solution. So I'm pretty much open for any discussion about this thing, how we can do it, if it's possible at all.
You might have to expand a few acronyms. Like, yeah. What is SNI?
Service server name identifier. So when a client talks to a TOS host, so for example, if the client connects attempts to connect to, for example, mycluster.com, and there is a proxy in front of it, which is capable of it will more or less this proxy will transfer your connection to the actual server which is serving under this domain, more or less.
It's a way of getting host name when you're connecting via TLS without needing to decrypt the TLS.
Yes.
The proxy, what would otherwise be unavailable because it's part of the HTTP request, but it can see it in the like TLS and stuff.
Okay. Maybe it's changed since I last saw it, but I thought that kubelet looked at the endpoints table, like the endpoints object, and not the service. Is that still correct?
Yes. So it will only add like the Kubernetes what was called host name and then service. I mean, yeah, I've written it there. So currently we can overcome this by having a mutating webhook, which is mutating all the pods, but it's not a nice solution in my honest opinion.
So sorry, you can fix many things with webhooks, but I still don't understand exactly what
So the problem is that
would you like it to do? I still don't understand. And like you talked about, like a mutating webhook can adjust pods in many ways, but it can't really change how.
So can you go over in the beginning? So the main problem is that components which are using the automatic discovery in cluster configuration, for example, client Go, they're looking for those specific environment variables called Kubernetes service port and Kubernetes service host. And if they're not present, they are, all those components are not automatically discovering that they're running inside of a Kubernetes cluster. And the kubelet is only injecting those if the master service, Kubernetes default, is of type cluster IP.
So you want a symbolic name in the service host environment variable?
Sorry, what?
You want a symbolic name in the service host environment variable?
Yeah. A DNS name.
DNS name.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty reasonable request.
As it was mentioned previously, the only problem with this approach is that for other clients, for other kubelet clients, this thing won't work. And for that use case, you need to have like the mutating webhook. Otherwise, yeah.
I didn't follow that.
Well, if you have older kubelets that don't know to look at the service object and set the environment variables to the DNS name. Like for 2 releases, you would have older kubelets that wouldn't be able to cope with this configuration. And
yes, it would take us.
that's true of any feature that has a kubelet.
I don't understand the relevance because that's true of anything that we change.
Yeah, that's true for any rollout. I think the bigger question for this is what will break when it reads the Kubernetes service host environment variable and doesn't get an IP but gets a DNS name. We can make sure client Go and like all the client libraries that we deal with support this. I don't think there are problems with those. We can check back a few releases, but it would be good to try to find out.
I've actually tried for quite a while, and it's working. I mean, this entire thing is working. I can't try it with our other languages, but I'll have to check there as well for the other.
Good point in that, like, there's tons and tons and tons of clients of this, and we don't have good visibility into what they're doing with that.
The other question is when we switch, if we switch this to not just be an IP, but also to be a DNS name, should that affect the server name that's used to verify TLS? Currently, it verifies the service name, but if it's given an actual DNS name, should that affect what is used?
Yeah, right now we have this like advertise address, which is a flag to API server. Like, we may need a symbolic name, like advertise symbolic name, which changes adds the external name on the service, ensures that we can check on startup that name is in the SANs for the cert that we're going to present. I think we might consider, instead of changing the existing environment variable, just set up a new environment variable. I think that's safer.
I would rather change the way Kube Quant Go does discovery, because the environment variables, they're not very good because they're not very dynamic.
Maybe just deprecate the environment variable
and have a file. Probably this is more.
We should like do just a DNS request of like kubernetes.default.service.cluster.local, and that can be a C name to the external name or something like that.
We had this conversation a while ago when it was being decided whether DNS was considered like a required part of Kubernetes. And the sort of foundational issue we came back to was that if client Go used a DNS name to resolve the API server, then kubedns and core DNS couldn't use client Go to reach the API server.
You can hack the DNS settings because previously it was not possible to hack the configuration.
Yeah, so making client Go resolve using DNS rather than looking at something injected put DNS on the critical path to reaching the API server, which didn't seem terrific and broke like DNS workloads. So we need to think through that, or have like a fallback, or if there's an injected value, use that. Otherwise, fall back to DNS. So anyway, we'd have to think through how that should behave.
Is this more about a networking issue, or is this about API machinery, or is more on the networking side?
I mean,
we own client Go, so that's why this came to us.
Yeah. But the environment variables are from the service, right?
Yeah, so kubelet and so node and network kind of own the environment variables injected in for services. But the interaction with client Go is significant, or client libraries in general. Is the goal to support this for all service types, or
no,
look at Kubernetes?
No. I mean, I have created even a PR, and it's especially targeting. It's only targeting the the master service. It's not targeting any other services, and this is by definition because Tim Hawking wanted to get rid of those because they were not
Kubernetes is already special case. It's the only one that gets injected across namespaces.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, in my honest opinion, the better solution will be to change the way dynamic detection works, and to make it like a file, and eventually deprecate the environment variables. Probably this is the better way, because Kubernetes already has it already knows how to talk to the API server, so we can simply use the same value even.
Is that true? I mean, the things inside pods aren't going to have the same network namespace or the same network visibility that the kubelet does necessarily. So the kubelet has to inject something into pods that makes sense inside the pods view of the network.
This is not simple.
Yeah.
Have we floated this with SIG network at all? Or is this the first time this has been discussed in the SIG meeting?
I couldn't find, except for this previous attempt, any discussions anywhere. The most of the discussions were about adding environment variables for external names, but
my feeling is that maybe is a little too small scope for the change that's actually needed. And I think of the questions raised, like the only one that I can definitively answer is like does this need a cap? And I think the answer is yes, it definitely needs a cap.
Okay.
I was going to say that, so you can.
So it feels good to like be sure about something. Yeah, I'm not quite sure like what should be in the cap. That might be something that we can. Like maybe it'd be good to start with a like this is the problem that we want to solve. Like I want my pod to contact the API server through this mechanism. Then like we can work out how to make that true. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. So I'll start writing something soon, hopefully, and let's see how things progress then.
Yeah, maybe keep it short at first, so we can all agree and merge like just like the requirements part of it, and then we can like maybe that'll make the design clearer.
Good. Very good. Thank you, Martin. Next one I think is Kevin. Are you there, Kevin?
Yeah. Hey there. I just wanted to update. To refresh that this exists, and wanted to know if something's happening on your end. I saw it got moved into. Oh wait, you're on the wrong issue. Did I copy the wrong one?
Yeah, it opens, but I don't know where. Okay, here.
Oh, there we go. I saw it got moved into API review, I think. But we're still waiting. I'm still waiting on a go to merge this and start with the implementation.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. Like this is assigned to me, and like this wasn't really on my radar. Can you like ping me on Slack aggressively until I like read it?
Will do.
Yeah. You can create the script.
I opened it a few times and didn't kind of get past the first couple of sections. It looked like there were still kind of a lot of TBD. Like it needed a little bit more details about. Who are the reviewers? Who are the approvers? Status should either be provisional or implementable. And then the one question I had kind of reading through it was, it didn't seem very well defined. Like if there are conflicts between what's in the manifest and what's on the parameters, and how should API servers treat unknown things in that in that part of the object. This is talking about like defining parameters inside the object, and so we should be clear about whether these are considered critical or optional, how unknown things are handled.
Yeah, so for the first part, I think this is still my first cap, and I didn't know what to, how detailed to fill up all the top things. If anything is missing, please, tell me, because I'm not sure about it.
Like 20th cap, don't worry.
Probably. I think there's a comment from Antoine that he wasn't sure if we even need this cap, or was it a different one? Not sure. Yeah, I only know that Antoine talked with Jordan, I think, and that I should change the name and then it would be good. And then I didn't know anything else. And I think Antoine is still gone. I don't even know that.
Antoine is back.
He just got
not in the room here, but yeah, he just got back.
Okay.
But it looks like
I was a little.
It looks like the ball is squarely in my court here, and this just wasn't on my radar for whatever reason.
Is this one on the critical path of server-side apply for 116?
We put it in beat-up blocking.
And I definitely want to look at it.
So we 3 people put it in there because we wanted it, I guess. But so as far as I know, we wanted for server-side apply to go beta. Yeah, and the other things we could open are mostly blocked due to the scalability issue. And one is open where I'm still waiting for help about the managed field wiping.
Yeah, the scalability issue is the thing that I was focusing on for apply when I was giving that time slices, but I'll try and give this one. I think we should go on to the next thing because we've only got 10 minutes left. Yeah, sorry for like dropping the ball on that.
No, but this is good, and as to close the loop, I think this cap was part of the caps that we reviewed when we did all the caps. So there was an action item to reach out to Kevin. So and it came back to us. So
yeah.
I was a little bit in the way what to do the last few weeks. So if there's more communication or whatever, I'm happy because I like work and stuff.
Please, everyone, feel free to reach out to me on Slack if I'm blocking you.
Okay, so we are not going. Last one, it's mine. We are not going to solve it today, but maybe we can start thinking on what we can do. As you know, I think the entire Kubernetes went under some security audit, and the auditors were creating a bunch of tickets for the different SIGs and projects. We got ours, which is this list filter. I did a super quick flight look over them. I don't know how actionable are them. They are kind of undefined a little bit. I don't know if anybody knows here also what is the deadline, if there is any commitment to we need to fix them by this version, or this is the time that we have now that these things are public. I think, Jordan, you are the closest person we have to security here, but I don't want to put all the spotlights on you. Maybe we need a separate meeting for this, but I wanted to raise awareness because we've been skipping them in the triage meetings that we do twice a week because actually we don't know very much.
Yeah, I think a dedicated meeting would probably be good. I also think that maybe a joint, maybe sending something to at least SIG-Auth and SIG API Machinery.
Yeah.
There's a lot that kind of touch both SIGs. Would probably make the best use of time. Otherwise, we're going to get a lot of like 2 people discussing something without the other 2 people.
Yeah. If everybody agrees, I will take that action item. I will try to coordinate between the 2 SIGs.
Okay.
Yeah, I to that I'd only add like I think we generally need a better mechanism of pairing up people who are willing to be new contributors with things to do.
Yeah.
And so maybe we can use these as an excuse to like get some experience helping people ramp up in this space.
There's a fair amount of research too that could be done ahead of time. So like for each of these, a lot of these are not new. And so like finding the existing issues or requests or earlier attempts or conversations and linking them in here. There's kind of three phases, like what's the history of this issue? Do we agree this is a thing that should be done? And then why isn't it or can't it be done? Sometimes it's for backwards compatibility. Sometimes it's something that's already possible but is not a default. And sometimes we agree it should be done, but it hasn't been a top priority. And so kind of pinning those things down for each issue.
But we've got to like farm out all of those things to people because, right, like we can't expect like Jordan to do the research on all of these and then give very concrete instructions to new contributors, because that's like the research is
the work,
much of the work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's not really helping us if it doesn't really help us. It doesn't help new contributors learn how to be an effective contributor, and it doesn't help existing contributors do less work. So we have to like farm out all parts of that process, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe one more question, if anybody knows, are these issues like qualified from the severity point of view? Is that something that is going to happen afterwards? I don't know how the process. Maybe
I assume if these are showing up as issues and not like through the security reporting chain, then it's not a high severity urgent thing.
They were all reviewed and scrubbed before the issues were opened and determined to either be low severity or already known issues or feature requests or things that are already possible but not done by default.
Okay.
Yeah. So anything that would require like a critical, urgent, immediate security response has already been scrubbed.
Okay. Well, thank you. So I took some two action items from this one. Maybe coordinate a joint meeting between the two SIGs, and then see if we can use this as an opportunity to spread it through the SIG and new contributors to do some research, and that. So I will work on those two. Very good. What else? Anything else? We ended up using almost the entire hour, but I think it was useful, good discussions. Anything else anybody in this meeting wants to bring up? No? Cool. Well, thank you everybody for joining. Hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks. A lot of action items, a lot of work to do. That's good. Have a good rest of your day, evening, night, morning. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you so much.